Heyo, EC here, and today it's Mario Day. Yes, the day where we all celebrate everyone's favourite mustachioed guy from Italy. Sorry. So we're going to talk about, obviously, Mario and whether or not Nintendo milks the character, milks Mario, and we're going to talk about that in this video. And I know it's going to be a little bit controversial because, obviously, it's an argument you see so much online. You see so many people complaining not only about Mario, but also Zelda and Pokemon being, like, the most milked Nintendo franchises. And we're going to basically sort of argue whether or not you can claim that it's, being overly exposed and stuff, and we're just going to talk about it in this video. So let's start with the obvious fact. On the Switch, I googled, obviously, how many Mario games on Switch, and annoyingly, Google Gemini took over and was like, hey, there's 20 to 30, and it's like, what does that even mean? What does that even mean, 20 to 30 Mario games? And then I realised it was including spin-offs like Luigi's Mansion 3 and the classic games on NSO, which you can argue those are Mario. You can argue in sort of a circumstance that obviously yes, those games are on Nintendo Switch and whatever, but I wouldn't classify the NSO games as being on the actual Switch, since they're obviously part of a subscription service. And also Luigi's Mansion 3, yes, that is a Mario spin-off. It is a Luigi game, but it is a Luigi game. Mario is not center focus, and really Mario is not really involved in those sort of games. The Luigi's Mansion games tend to be focused on Luigi, and yes, while Mario is in the first one, for example, he is not really the major draw of those games. The major draw of those games is obviously playing as Luigi. Likewise as well, when you start looking across Mario as a brand, you got to start looking at other sub-franchises. Do you include the Princess Peach games as Mario games? Do you include Donkey Kong? Because remember, Mario is originally a spin-off of Donkey Kong, so is Donkey Kong a Mario game? Do you have to classify games like Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze as being in the Mario series? Or because if you look at Nintendo's financial reports, they refer to Donkey Kong as its own franchise. So is that a part of the Mario franchise? Because remember, Mario is a spin-off of Donkey Kong. Is that something people don't seem to factor in this argument? Likewise as well, when you look at the actual sort of spin-off franchises that got games on Switch, there's not really that many that really got more than one or two games. So, for example, if you look at 2D Mario got obviously New Super Mario Bros. U Deluxe, which was a port of a Wii U game. You also got New Super Mario Bros. Wonder, and that was mainline 2D Marios. The mainline 3D Marios was Super Mario Odyssey, which was the brand new game. And obviously you got a port of Super Mario 3D World, which is obviously a Wii U game with obviously Bowser's Fury added in. And you also got, the remasters of Mario Galaxy 1 and 2, which were remasters of Wii games. And you can argue whether or not you count remasters and remakes as their own games. To me, I just think when you start looking at, Mario as a broader franchise, people see any game that has Mario in it as obviously it's part of the Mario franchise, which yes, it is true. Obviously, for example, Mario Kart, Mario Kart 8 Deluxe was the best-selling game on the Switch. But you also got to think, people aren't just buying Mario Kart because it's Mario. They're buying Mario Kart because they know Mario Kart is a huge brand. Everyone knows Mario Kart. It's a fun time. And a lot of people grew up playing Mario Kart. You remember the first Mario Kart came out in the 90s. People have been playing Mario Kart for like 30 years. So to be able to play a Mario Kart game either competitively online with their friends, or play it with their kids, or play it, or the kids want to play it for the first time with their friends, or, you got like little brother and sister who want to play the game. It's really an argument you can't really make. And the thing is, with this argument that, Nintendo milks Mario, I don't want to try and justify it, but I think as well, people need to factor in, we live in an IP-centric world. We live in a world where companies like, say, Nintendo, like Disney, they're scared to take risks on franchises that obviously aren't guaranteed sellers. These are franchises that aren't guaranteed to sell like billion copies or billion movie ticket sales and whatever. And that's why you see a lot of investment in franchises like Mario, for example, because Mario, for example, is a guaranteed seller. I think, as far as I'm aware, there's only been really one Mario game that really undersold in the last 2 decades, and that was a 3DS game that was released in 2019 for some reason. I don't know why they released a 3DS game in 2019. I don't know what they were trying to do with that, but they tried. But when you get down to nitty-gritty, you start looking at the other Mario franchises. The Mario Sports series, yes, it had 3 installments, but you only had one tennis game, one golf game, and one football game. And I refer to it as football because obviously I am British. I come from the land of tea and crumpets. And also, not being funny, it's football. It's not soccer. It's called football. If you say it's soccer, you are just wrong. Now, we also need to factor in Yeah, other aspects that you got to think, like the Super Mario Bros. Movie was the first Mario movie well, not even just first Mario movie, first Nintendo movie in a long time. And the reason they launched it with Mario is because Mario is obviously a well-known brand. Everyone knows Mario. Mario is, let's be honest, he's one of gaming's biggest icons, but also he's a character that even if you don't play games, you know who that is. You know, people who don't play video games knows who Mario is, knows, kind of the gist of what he does. That, he comes from a story where obviously he's your average guy and he's got to save a princess and whatever. People know who Mario is even if they don't interact with the games or they've not interacted with games for so many years. And that's sort of the main aspect on why they started the Nintendo Cinematic Universe, as it were, the NCU with Mario. Now, you also got to factor in, if you look at games like Smash Bros, for example, Smash Bros is a crossover fighting game with characters from all sorts of franchises: Mario, Zelda, Pokemon, Kirby. You've got games from, or you've even got characters in games like Metal Gear Solid involved in that. So is that another situation where Mario's being milked? Because obviously Mario is one of the characters you see on the box. He's obviously one of the main characters in the images for the game. He's one of the ones they use to promote it. No, that's not a situation where they're milking Mario. It's a crossover fighting game. But why is that seen as a different argument than obviously them releasing a remaster of some Mario games for like a Mario anniversary, or them using Mario as a brand? And I guess you can make the argument that yes, Nintendo is milking Mario. You can make that argument, but it's sort of how you got to play the game nowadays. You can't just say, oh yeah, Nintendo's milking Mario, Nintendo's milking Zelda, Nintendo's milking Pokemon, because every game company is milking their long-established franchise. Look at Activision. They're releasing Call of Duty games yearly, and it's not like with Mario where a lot of them are spin-offs or they're remasters or remakes. In a lot of the case of game series like Call of Duty, for example, it's literally a new game every year. It is a new mainline game every year, and that's sort of where you got to look at it from a different aspect. With Mario, I feel like with Mario, where they have so many different spin-offs that they can just utilize, and they can do like Paper Mario, they can do obviously Mario Sports, they can do obviously Mario Party, they can do obviously the mainline 2D and 3D Marios. I feel like Mario has sort of more of a sort of, I don't know how to put it, but more of a sort of longer shelf life than a game like Call of Duty or, for example, EA Sports titles, because EA Sports titles, they release a new one every single year. And with those games, all they do is like change a few players in the roster and maybe a few teams. There's not really much you can do with those sort of games. So I do think when you look down at the nitty-gritty of it, I do think people can make the argument that Nintendo's milking Mario, but I also do think that Mario, because obviously Mario is obviously a huge franchise and has all these different aspects. And like I said, when you talk about Mario, do you include like, Wario Land, WarioWare, Luigi's Mansion, Donkey Kong, Princess Peach? You include all those games and sub-genres or sub-series? No, I wouldn't classify them as Mario games, because obviously they are Mario spin-offs and they don't star Mario. So I feel like that's something you got to think about when you talk about Mario as a franchise and when Mario's being milked by Nintendo, is the fact that Mario is obviously such sort of a universal franchise, a universal character. He's someone that a lot of people can relate to. We live in an IP-centric world where IP means more than most things now. If the IP is obviously someone like Mario or Mickey Mouse, something, for example, then it's guaranteed to sell. And really, I do feel like we're in a position in the world where people are making these sort of videos because it's all clickbait, and also the people that complain saying, oh, Nintendo milks Mario, they're always the first ones to complain when a Nintendo console like the Switch 2 doesn't launch with a Mario game, or at least a mainline 3D Mario platformer. But let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Do you think Nintendo is milking Mario? Let me know in the comments. I would love to hear your thoughts. Just don't start effing and blind at me telling me about how I'm wrong, because we have a different opinion. Let's have a civil conversation, shall we? Anyway, I've been EC. Make sure you subscribe, and I'll see you next one. Peace.